Hello, everyone, and welcome to Whiskey Uncorked. My name is Brian, and we're back today with another Scotch whiskey review. And once again, we are visiting the heavily peated, heavily sherried area of Scotch whiskey, but this time with a brand new contender from the Isle of Arran. We're talking about the Lagg Corriecravie. So this one is up against some pretty big competition, at least in terms of my recent reviews. We talked about an Octomore with some PX influence. We talked about the brand new Lafroy Carchis. We've talked about one of my favorite peated whiskeys over the last several years in the Port Charlotte OLC. And we just recently reviewed the Kilchoman Seneg. So all of those whiskeys got really nice scores. I think 8 and 9s for basically all of them. And this whiskey was one that when it was announced, or when I first started seeing people talk about it and review it in the UK, because we pretty recently just got access to this here in the US. But when I first started seeing people talking about this whiskey, I got super excited. So Lagg is owned and operated by the same owners of the Lochranza distillery, which makes the Isle of Arran line of Scotch whiskey. They did make peated whiskey at the Lochranza distillery, but they decided that they wanted a second distillery to basically completely focus on peated expressions. That distillery was founded in 2019, and they just started releasing core releases last year in 2023, so very young whiskey. Currently, they have two kind of core expressions, the Kilmorey, which is 46% ABV and exclusively bourbon matured, and the Lagg, which is matured in bourbon and then finished in sherry casks. One other factor that sets Lagg apart from its bourbon matured counterpart in the Kilmorey is that this is bottled at a higher ABV. It is bottled at 55%. It is non-chill filtered. It is natural color, of course, but it is not cask strength. It is 55%. They bring it down, which for a young whiskey is probably better, at least in my opinion, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So this is putting it 55% ABV, very sherry forward whiskey. You can see from the color, this is a very dark color. So they weren't shy with the sherry influence. If you've been watching my channel, you know that I do prefer some sherry with younger whiskey because it does help round out some of the rough edges of that young spirit. So this is putting it into a category of Scotch whiskey that many people love and that it also has many competitors. So it's got a lot of work to do. But if you're in the UK, it's coming in at a pretty fair price. I believe it was around £55 or so, which would put it $75-ish after tax. However, that's not really what this is selling for in the States. Here locally, I was able to pick this up from Cano for about $100 plus tax. I have seen it as high as, I believe Binny's in Chicago had it for $120, although it was on sale to $110 when I checked online the other day. So we are definitely paying a bit of a premium for this one. Again, why we pay premiums on some things and barely any on others, I'm not sure. But we'll talk about value a little bit more towards the end of the video. I did just want to say that I'm a huge fan of what's coming out of Lochranza via the Arran brand. I never did buy a bottle of the Macri more. I was always a little bit curious, but I just had other priorities to try in that heavily peated area of Scotch whiskey. But when I started hearing some reviews about this, I got really excited because the sherry cask in particular, I really love what Arran did with their 18-year-old expression, which is coming back, I hear. Hopefully, I don't know if they've said how much they're going to be selling that for. I assume it's going to be on the higher end of enthusiast-focused whiskeys, at least, excluding the super luxury brands. But they've definitely made it apparent that they know what they're doing with sherry casks. I was able to taste this prior to buying a bottle, thanks to my brother. As I mentioned, we send each other blind samples, blind sample flights, and we get together every couple weeks, and we kind of do a flight that we have sent each other. And probably a couple months ago, he sent me a flight of heavily peated, cask forward whiskeys. Maybe not all of them, now that I think about it, but anyways, this came in second, and it only lost to the Port Charlotte 18, which you all know that I absolutely adored and gave a 9 out of 10. Additionally, he just did my blind that I sent him that included this, and that won his flight. It beat out the Port Charlotte 18-year-old by quite a bit. But obviously it's blinds, it changes all the time. We're always kind of surprised. But yeah, this did really well in both instances for both of us. In blinds, coming in second for me, only behind an 18-year-old whiskey, and flat out won when he tasted it. So given my just general excitement for it, just hearing about it and hearing some of the reviews and actually getting to try it myself, I said that extra premium was definitely going to be worth picking up a bottle, at least one, and get to know it and just see how much I liked it. And at the end of the day, that $100, if you ignore the age statement, the ABV and all of the specs and things do put it in line with, say, the Lefroy Carchis, which is one of my favorite releases every year. We just reviewed the 2024, I think a month or two ago now. And I absolutely adored that whiskey. I gave it a 9 out of 10, was super excited for it. And it's the epitome of what a special release out of Scotland should be, at least on a year-to-year basis, even if I have preferences over which ones I liked more. So this is pretty in line with that. We usually get that for about $100 or so a bottle plus tax. Again, if your local stores are asking $120, you really probably should stop and think about that a little bit, see if you can source it from somewhere else. At that price, you can have no problem getting this cheaper from overseas, having it shipped. But yeah, because at the end of the day, this is like 4-year-old whiskey. And if you're paying even $100 for that, just on a basic level, is too much. But at the end of the day, it's about the results and it's about the taste and the flavor. It's a new distillery. And I don't think it's actually Lagg's fault that that's what it costs. Never really know, but generally speaking, here in the US, you just kind of assume that the importers and the distribution networks and things are taking a little bit extra of a cut. And maybe they anticipated that this would be a big sought-after release. Although it's readily available at the stores that I know carry it. So since picking this bottle up and really starting to get to know it, I certainly don't like it any less. It is, spoiler alert, another really fantastic whiskey. And in terms of some of the younger, brand new distilleries coming out with these very young age statements, this might be one of the better ones that I've had. But why don't we just jump in and do some nosing and tasting notes, give this thing a score, and we'll talk about value real quick. All right, on the nose. So obviously with these types of whiskeys, the first thing you're always probably going to notice is the peat. At a young age like this, you may either anticipate and hope for, or maybe kind of worry that the peat is just going to be this overwhelming thing. And here it is not. It's kind of this slightly industrial and slightly Isla ashy sort of peat, smoke, I should say. But it's actually really well integrated. It's certainly present. It's not invisible by any means. When you smell it, you know you're drinking something that has a pretty heavy dose of peat. But at 50 ppm, which I believe is what they have said, well, at least what the Whiskey Yearbook says that they peat most of their barley to. I think they probably are doing some experimentation, probably maybe some super heavily peated sort of things, but which would be, I'm sure, quite fun to try. But at 50 ppm, they're not messing around with that. But again, one of the things that really works so well with that heavily peated, heavily sherried style is those two things play off of each other really well. They can kind of soften each other. Those are two things that can oftentimes overwhelm a glass of whiskey. Sometimes for the better, sometimes it's fun. But generally speaking, I think along with a lot of other Scotch whiskey lovers, I just really enjoy how those two things tend to even each other out. But let's see what else we can find here. I think after the blind tasting, I was thinking that this was, my memory of it was this very dense, dark, rich, budgy sort of whiskey. And at least on the nose and on the palate, I think as I've gotten to know this, it's become much brighter. There's much more of a kind of a citrus note to it. Right, a little bit of orange, a little bit of maritime, kind of that island quality. There is some malt and some spirit kind of still there, but everything is really well balanced and kind of playing off of each other. I'd say like there's an earthiness as well. I was thinking the other day, and I still think I kind of agree with this, but just damp wood, like just maybe like waterlogged wood, rocks, that sort of thing. It just kind of has that coastal, earthy, fresh smell to it. Outside of that little bit of kind of citrus, orange, not a ton of other fruit coming out on the nose. Obviously there is a pretty distinct kind of dark quality overall to it. So dried plums, maybe some dried cherries, but I think overall you're getting this combination of earthy, citrus, and then this kind of ashy, slightly industrial peat smoke. So overall I really like the nose. There's really good balance between the peat and the sherry, as I mentioned. You're getting really interesting kind of coastal earthiness. There's a touch of fruit in here, both maybe, as I mentioned, that orange and a little bit of kind of really dark dried fruits. There is some spice in here. The spice, I would say, is kind of like a black pepper, again kind of contributing to the earthiness a little bit, maybe a little bit of that woody spice, but I really enjoy nosing this whiskey. It's complex without being confusing or messy. It doesn't go too far. It's not the most complex whiskey out there, but it has enough to really keep you interested, and I really have zero complaints about the nose. With that, let's try it on the palate. Cheers. So as soon as this hits your tongue, the tip of your tongue, you're immediately hit with flavor. There's no trying to coax it out. You don't have to like chew on it to get to the best part or anything like that. It's immediately just flavor right away. It stays pretty consistent. It's not overwhelming. The 55% ABV is like perfect. You definitely are getting some strength, but it's not hot by any stretch of the imagination. And there's almost everything you would kind of expect from the nose. It's sweeter, I think, overall than I anticipated, given the nose. But you're getting earthiness, caramel. You're getting some chocolate, although not nearly as much as, like I said, I think I remember on my blind tasting. But you're getting some of that pepperiness, particularly coming in on the finish. There is a fruitiness there, I think, a little bit more on the on the finish. Sorry, there's almost like a minty aftertaste on the back of the palate. There's a lot of things to kind of sort through here, which again is a testament to this whiskey being only 4-ish years old and just masterful use of sherry casks, particularly that being that it's a finish. Let's go in for one more sip and see if we can pull out anything else. Maybe I can articulate that a little bit better. I feel like I was a little all over the place, but there is kind of a lot to think about with this. Like I said, you don't get a lot of time to just slowly get into the whiskey because you're immediately have a mouthful of flavor. So here we go. So the mouthfeel on this is fantastic. It's oily, it's thick. There is a weightiness, I guess, to it. It's a term I think I've heard used with this whiskey. It's salty, almost like a salty bite on the back end rather than like an alcohol bite. It's very kind of coastal. There's a bit of a savoriness to it as well. The fruitiness, I think it's more fruity on the palate, again, along with that sweetness. Definitely a bit brighter red fruit, maybe like more of a fresh cherry sort of flavor. The finish, it definitely lingers a little bit. It's not this big, super complex finish, which again, you can probably anticipate from the youth. Maybe that's the one The one area where you can kind of say it maybe is showing a little bit of its youth is just on the finish, where it's there, but I think that's it's the casks that are kind of helping it stick there, and the spirit itself isn't bringing a ton of that kind of back end complexity. But I don't think that's really something I would ever even think about or complain about if I wasn't trying to analyze it, because it definitely still has a ton of presence even now. This was one, the more I sipped on it, I think the more honey came out. It's kind of a mouth-watering experience as well, right? You're just sitting trying to talk after taking a sip is a little bit of a challenge, because I just feel like I have to keep swallowing. And I just think the combination of kind of the fruity, earthy, peppery, there's definitely some baking spice. This has definitely got more of like a Christmas spice overall. I think I can just keep taking sips of this, and I'll just keep trying to find new things. But this whiskey is a ton of fun. It does probably lack, I don't know if this is necessarily even a lack per se, but say with like the Lagg Corriecravie, it just had, I think the extra time in the cask just continued to integrate and just ended up presenting this like really full, more consistent, readable flavor. Not that this is necessarily a bad thing, it not being that. Like I said, it is fun and it's delicious. I think it really, at this point, I'm just looking for something to be quote unquote wrong with it, which maybe as a quote unquote critic, which is ridiculous now that I think that's the first time I ever said that word out loud, and it's definitely not why I started this channel, but I guess that's by default what I am. I think with these youthful whiskeys, right, you have to look at them different, and what are they doing and what's fun about them, what's interesting about them, where even at 10 years old with that Lagg, yeah, you can expect they're way past their experimentation stage. You know, they've been around forever, where, I mean, these guys at Lagg are releasing this whiskey like literally like almost as soon as it was ready. And obviously you never know for sure what that whiskey is going to taste like until you hit that 3-year mark. Obviously you can, maybe get an idea over those first 3 years, but it's hard to plan your products when you don't know exactly what they're going to taste like. But yeah, I can try to dig for critiques here, but I think for what this is, I don't know how you do something better. These heavily peated, heavily cask forward whiskeys at 4 years old, absolutely belonging on the shelf next to something with a little bit more maturity, with deeper stock, a distillery with deeper stocks, and just more experience with that spirit and what it does in these casks and that cask. This is an absolutely fantastic start from Lagg. And in terms of a score, I've been giving these styles of whiskeys. Now, obviously, I've been reviewing whiskeys that I know I love and are good, at least in this kind of heavily peated, heavily cask forward category. This is no slouch. This is right there. It maybe doesn't carry quite the wow factor of some of the more established distilleries. Those Port Charlotte cask exploration bottles are fantastic. I absolutely adore the Lagg Corriecravie line. These are kind of the two that I have the most experience with that this would kind of compete against, I suppose. And I might not love this quite as much as those, but it's not that far off. So as a score, does this get up to an 8? Yeah, this is definitely like 7.8 to 8.2 category. So it's kind of like flip a coin. Again, I do think I need to be a little bit more judicious with my scoring, but here's the thing. I think about the whiskeys that I've given a 7, and I've given a lot of those kind of 10-year-old like introductory Islay whiskeys a 7s out of 10. This is better than that. This is really nice. I do have a bottle of Ardbeg Ugadal that I need to crack open one of these days and drink and review that, although I've had that one on the shelf for a little while. I bought multiples and drank the first one. Had a backup kind of hanging around, and it might be time to crack that one open and see where that one fits, because that's also going to be another contender in this category. But yeah, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. We'll say it barely crosses the line. It's a fantastic whiskey. It's, like I said, it's like 4 years old. It's a finish from sherry. It's one of the better, I think, finishes I've seen, because you do still get some maltiness overall. You still do get a touch of the spirit, but you can just see how much work the cask is doing, and particularly when it's this color, you almost feel like, well, this is just going to be a sherry bomb that you're not even going to know what Lagg Spirit tastes like. I do still need to grab the Kilmore, the 46% bourbon one. I'll get around to that at some point. But yeah, this is a winner. 8 out of 10. Maybe a little bit on the lower side of 8 out of 10, but 8 out of 10 is excellent. If it gets an 8 out of 10, it's a fantastic whiskey. But now, let's talk about value. So value on this is simple and yet complicated. If you're in the UK, if you're paying £55 for this, if you can find this in the US or wherever you are, the equivalent of £55, which is about $75 these days, I think. It's somewhere in there. I didn't actually look up the specific exchange rate today, although it's been pretty bad for the dollar. I think it's been around like 31, 32% recently. But if you can pick this up for Lagg's MSRP or RRP at 55-ish pounds, and you know you like this style of whiskey, it's a no-brainer. You pick one of these up every day, see where it fits for you. Not gonna say it's gonna be your favorite, but I think this is an interesting, very fun, very tasty whiskey that absolutely deserves some support from the community. Now, if you're paying, I paid $100 for this plus tax. I also had to have it shipped, for that matter, just because it's not in every store, and I live in San Diego, where like stores here don't know that Scotch is a thing. So very few, at least. So I usually have to tack on a few extra bucks for shipping, although at least that usually doesn't kill me, because I can just get it from a different California store. But yeah, $100 is probably where I think, from a value perspective, we're definitely somebody's pocketing some extra cash along that distribution chain. But that's fine. If you're getting up into that $110, $120 plus tax area, I definitely would probably think about it. Definitely try to get a dram of it and see if you're willing to pay, essentially, I mean, you're approaching almost double what the RRP would be. And as I mentioned, if you live in a state where you can order from overseas, 40, you take that 20% off, it's down to 45-ish pounds. Do the conversion, add $30 for a bottle for shipping per bottle. You're probably going to be in and around that $100 range anyways. So yeah, from Lagg's perspective, from the distillery perspective, it's a fantastic value. It's fair for what they're giving you here in the US. You kind of gotta do a few mental gymnastics, but $100, I'd say grab it. If you're paying it any more than that, just definitely try it first. All right, and with that, I just want to say thank you. We are almost at 500 subscribers. If you're still watching, please, I'm begging. It's that first line in the sand for YouTube, I guess. Channel memberships and super chats and things like that. We'll see. I do want to start doing some live streams at some point. But yeah, let me know what you think. Hit that like button if you've made it this far. And yeah, if you haven't already, please hit that sub button. But until next week, for another review, thanks again. Cheers.